There's a version of you that currently exists only as potential, a version so grounded, so present, and so unshakably committed to their own evolution that if you encountered them today, you wouldn't recognize yourself looking back and you'd feel something unfamiliar, not fear exactly, but respect, the kind of respect you give to forces of nature you cannot negotiate with, because the ocean doesn't ask permission to have tides and gravity, doesn't apologize for keeping you on the ground, and this version of you wouldn't ask permission to exist either. And most people think discipline is about waking up early or meal prepping or grinding while everyone else sleeps, but that's not discipline, that's a routine, and routines break the moment. Your life falls apart because real discipline isn't what you do when you feel motivated. Real discipline is what remains after every reason to continue has been burned to the ground. It's the foundation that holds when the house is gone, and I'm not here to give you another rise and grind speech. I'm here to show you the architecture of unshakable self-command. The kind that doesn't crumble when you're exhausted, heartbroken, scared, or lost. The kind that makes people wonder how you stay so steady while everything around you is burning. But you need to understand something before we begin. This isn't self-help. This is self-excavation. We're not adding anything to you. We're removing everything that isn't you, and that process isn't comfortable. It's archaeological. You have to dig through layers of conditioning, coping mechanisms, and comfort-seeking behaviors that took decades to build, and by the end of this you'll understand why willpower is a myth, why your feelings are terrible leaders, and why the most free person in any room is the one who has stopped negotiating with their own weaknesses. So let me tell you about the biggest lie you've been sold. The lie is that you need to feel ready before you act. That motivation precedes action, that somewhere, somehow, if you just wait long enough or watch enough videos or read enough books, a wave of inspiration will crash over you and carry you effortlessly toward your goals. This is garbage, and deep down you know it, because think about every time you've said, I just need to get motivated. What did you actually do? You scrolled. You watched. You consumed content about action instead of taking action. You were waiting for a feeling to save you from a decision, and here's what the research actually shows. Dr. John Schouten studied what he calls the motivation myth and found that motivation doesn't lead to action, action leads to motivation. The relationship is backwards from what we believe. You don't run because you feel motivated. You feel motivated because you started running, and dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with motivation and reward, isn't released when you achieve a goal. It's released during the pursuit of the goal. The doing creates the wanting. To do more action is the engine, feeling is just the exhaust. So if you're sitting here today waiting to feel disciplined before you act disciplined, you'll be waiting forever. You're waiting for a train that only departs after you've already started walking, and the ancient Stoics understood this 2,000 years before neuroscience confirmed it. Epictetus, who was born a slave and became one of history's most influential philosophers, said, first say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to do. Notice the order: identity first, then action, not feeling, not motivation. Identity. He didn't say wait until you feel like it. He said declare who you are, then act accordingly, whether you feel like it or not. And this is the first fundamental shift you must make. You stop being a person who chases motivation. You become a person who acts on identity. So let me give you a concrete example. Two people are trying to get in shape. Person A says, I need to get motivated to work out. They wait. They watch fitness videos. They buy a gym membership they don't use. They're waiting for the feeling. Person B says, I am someone who works out. That's just who I am. When morning comes and the alarm goes off, they don't ask, do I feel like going? They ask, does someone who works out stay in bed? The answer is obvious. They get up. No motivation required, just identity fulfillment. And this is what psychologists call self-signaling theory. Every action you take is a vote for the person you're becoming. When you act in alignment with an identity, you strengthen that identity. When you act against it, you weaken it. You're always voting. The question is, who are you voting for? Because most people are voting for the person they used to be. They act based on old identities, old patterns, old limitations. They're still voting for the version of themselves that quit, that settled, that took the easy path, and you need to start voting for someone else. Someone you haven't met yet, someone who doesn't negotiate with comfort, someone who doesn't wait for feelings to align. So here's your first exercise right now. Stop reading and ask yourself, who would I have to become to achieve the things I say I want? Not what would I have to do, who would I have to be? Write that down, one sentence. I am someone who. That's your new identity, and from now on, you don't ask, do I feel like it? You ask, does someone like me do this? The answer will always tell you what to do, and this is how you break the motivation trap. You stop chasing feelings and start embodying identity, and the beautiful thing, the feelings eventually show up anyway. They just show up after you've already done the work, as a reward, not a prerequisite. Now, let's talk about why knowing what to do and actually doing it are two completely different things. Because you already know you should exercise, you already know you should eat better, you already know you should work on your business, call your mother, read more books, and stop scrolling at 2 a.m. Knowledge isn't your problem. Implementation isn't. Implementation isn't a character flaw, it's a design flaw. You're trying to run modern software on biological hardware that hasn't been updated in 200 years. Your brain evolved for one primary purpose: survival on the savannah, not thriving in the modern world, not achieving your goal, survival. And the primary rule of survival is conserve energy. Your brain is wired to make you as lazy as possible, because for most of human history, laziness meant you didn't waste calories you might need later when food was scarce. And this is why willpower doesn't work. Willpower is you trying to override a million years of evolutionary programming with conscious effort. It's like trying to hold back the ocean with a broom. You might succeed for a few seconds, but eventually the tide wins. So if willpower is doomed to fail, what actually works? Systems, environments, automaticity. Let me introduce you to the work of Dr. Wendy Wood, a research psychologist who spent 30 years studying habit formation. Her findings are remarkable. She discovered that about 43% of our daily actions are performed out of habit, not conscious decision. Almost half your life is on autopilot, and the question is, what's on your autopilot? What are your defaults when you wake up? Do you automatically reach for your phone? That's a habit. When you're stressed, do you automatically open the refrigerator? That's a habit. When you sit down to work, do you automatically check social media? That's a habit. Your life isn't determined by your conscious choices, it's determined by your default settings, and most people never inspect their defaults. They just run whatever program got installed years ago by circumstance, advertising, and peer pressure. And here's what the research shows about changing those defaults. Wood found that 3 elements create lasting behavior change: context, repetition, and reward. But the most powerful of these is context, your environment. You see, your brain is constantly scanning your environment for cues. When you see a comfortable couch, your brain activates rest mode. When you see your running shoes by the door, your brain activates exercise mode. When your phone is on your nightstand, your brain activates scroll mode. The moment you wake up, and most people try to change their behavior while keeping their environment exactly the same. They want different results from the same triggers. That's like planting a cactus in a swamp and wondering why it's not thriving. So let me give you a practical example. A friend of mine wanted to stop drinking soda. He tried willpower for years. Every day he'd tell himself, no soda today, every day. He'd walk past the vending machine at work and resist, and every few days he'd cave. Willpower failed repeatedly. Then he changed his environment. He stopped buying soda at the grocery store. He removed it from his house entirely. He started carrying a water bottle everywhere, so when thirst hit, water was the default. He didn't rely on willpower. In the moment, he engineered his environment, so the easy choice was also the right choice, and this is what you must do. Stop trying to be strong, start trying to be smart. Design your world so discipline isn't a battle you have to fight every day. Here's how this applies to your goals for work. Put your phone in another room when you need to focus. Use website blockers, create a dedicated workspace. That triggers work mode, make distraction harder and focus easier for fitness, sleep in your workout. Clothes, put your gym bag by the door, pre-book your classes so skipping costs you money, make exercise the path of least resistance for nutrition. Don't keep junk food in the house, meal prep so healthy eating is faster than ordering delivery. Make the good choice the easy choice. This isn't about motivation, it's about architecture. You're not fighting yourself, you're designing for yourself. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche wrote, "One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star." Most people misinterpret this. They think he's glorifying chaos, but read it again. He says you must have chaos, not be chaos. The chaos is contained. It's material to work with, but the structure, the architecture, the container, that's what allows the dancing star to be born, and your environment is that container it holds. The chaos of your impulses so your potential can emerge. So here's your second exercise: audit your environment. Today, walk through your home, your workspace, your car. Ask yourself, what does this space make easy? What does it make hard? If you want different results, you need different defaults. Change the environment before you try to change yourself. Now, let's get deeper into the brain, because once you understand what's actually happening when you don't feel like it, you can stop treating it as a personal failure and start treating it as a biological process you can work with. There's a structure in your brain called the anterior mid-cingulate cortex. It's a small region, but it might be the most important area for understanding discipline. Researchers have found that this area is like a bridge between your emotional brain and your logical brain. It's the part that activates when you do something difficult that you don't want to do. And here's what's fascinating: the anterior mid-cingulate cortex actually grows with use. It's like a muscle. Every time you push through resistance, every time you do the thing you don't want to do, this area strengthens, and when you consistently avoid difficulty, it atrophies. This is physical, this is measurable, this isn't metaphor. Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett, a neuroscientist at Northeastern University, has shown that what we call willpower is actually just your brain's ability to regulate your body's energy and resources when you're tired, hungry, stressed, or overwhelmed. Your brain literally has less metabolic energy available for self-regulation. It's not that you're weak, it's that your brain is running on empty, and making difficult choices requires fuel, and this explains so much about why discipline fails at certain times. It's not a moral failure, it's an energy management problem. Think about it. When have you made your worst decisions? Late at night, right when you're exhausted? When have you broken your diet after a long, stressful day? When have you snapped at someone you love when you're already depleted? Your brain has a limited budget of regulatory resources. Every decision, every resistance to temptation, every moment of focus, it all draws from the same account. And when that account is empty, your defaults take over. You reach for the phone, you eat the sugar, you skip the workout, and this is why the just try harder advice is so useless. It's like telling someone with an empty bank account to just write a bigger check. There's nothing there to draw from. So what actually works? 3 things. First, strategic timing. Do your most important work when your regulatory resources are highest. For most people, that's morning. Don't save your hardest tasks for 9 p.m. when your brain is already exhausted. Do them early. Protect that window like it's sacred. Second, reduce decisions. Every decision you make depletes your resources slightly. This is called decision fatigue. The more choices you make, the worse your subsequent choices become. This is why people like Steve Jobs wore the same clothes every day, not because they lacked fashion sense, because they were preserving decision energy for what mattered. You can do this too. Simplify your meals. Create routines. Stop deciding what to wear, what to eat, when to work. Make those things automatic, so your brain's resources are available for what actually matters. Third, manage your biology. Sleep, nutrition, movement. These aren't separate from discipline. They are discipline you cannot outthink. A depleted nervous system. You cannot willpower your way through exhaustion if you're not sleeping enough, eating poorly, and living sedentarily. Your brain literally lacks the biological capacity for consistent self-command. And let me share something from military research. Navy SEALs aren't selected primarily for physical strength, they're selected for what psychologists call mental toughness under load. But here's what they found: even the toughest SEALs make poor decisions when they're sleep deprived and underfed. The biology always wins. The difference is that SEALs are trained to recognize their biological state and compensate for it. They know when they're depleted, so they don't trust their impulses. They have protocols for low energy states, and you need protocols too. When you're tired, what's your plan? When you're stressed, what's your default? When your regulatory resources are empty, what system catches you? This isn't about being perfect, it's about being prepared. So here's your third exercise: identify your danger zones. When are you most likely to break discipline? Late at night after work, when you're alone on weekends. Write those down, then create a protocol for each one. What will you do instead? Who will you call? Where will you go? Plan for your weakest moments before they arrive, because the prepared mind doesn't need willpower, it just follows the plan. Now we need to talk about something uncomfortable, something no one wants to admit. You are addicted to comfort. We all are, and this addiction is the primary obstacle between you and the person you could become, because we live in the most comfortable era in human history: temperature-controlled environments, food delivered to our doors, endless entertainment at our fingertips. Pain has been engineered out of daily existence, and in its absence, something has gone wrong. We've lost the ability to tolerate discomfort, and because we can't tolerate discomfort, we can't grow. Consider this: every meaningful achievement in human history required discomfort. Every great work of art, every scientific breakthrough, every physical feat, they all required pushing through resistance. The muscle tears and rebuilds stronger. The problem is wrestled with until it yields. The skill is practiced until it becomes mastery. Growth and discomfort are not enemies, they're married. You cannot have one without the other. But modern life has convinced us that discomfort is a problem to be solved rather than a signal to be interpreted. When we feel uncomfortable, we reach for our phones, we open the fridge, we pour a drink, we scroll, we distract, we do anything except sit with the discomfort and let it teach us. The philosopher Nietzsche had a concept he called amor fati, love of fate, but he also wrote extensively about what he called the discipline of suffering. He believed that hardship wasn't just inevitable, but necessary, that the person who hasn't suffered deeply hasn't been forged into anything substantial. And let me be clear, I'm not advocating for unnecessary suffering. I'm not telling you to be miserable. I'm telling you to stop running from the discomfort that's already part of growth. When you don't want to work out, that discomfort isn't a sign to stop. It's a sign that growth is available. When you don't want to make that difficult call, that resistance isn't a warning, it's an invitation. When you want to quit, that urge isn't wisdom, it's your comfort-seeking wiring trying to protect you from the pain of expansion. The psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi studied what he called flow states, the experience of complete absorption in challenging activity, and he found something crucial: flow only occurs at the edge of your abilities too easy and you're bored too hard, and your anxious flow lives in the space where challenge slightly exceeds current skill. In other words, flow requires discomfort. The moments you feel most alive aren't the moments of ease. They're the moments when you're fully extended, slightly overwhelmed, completely present, because the task demands everything you have. So here's the question: what are you avoiding right now? What's the thing you know you should do, but keep finding reasons not to? That thing, that specific discomfort, that's your edge. Most people spend their entire lives circling their edge, but never stepping over it. They stay in the comfortable middle, not bored enough to change, not challenged enough to grow, just stuck, perpetually stuck, and the death of the pleasure seeker is the birth of the growth seeker. You have to kill the part of you that prioritizes comfort over expansion, not once every day, because that part doesn't die easily. It resurrects every morning when the alarm goes off, when the workout feels hard. When the work gets boring, you have to kill it again and again. This is what the ancient Greeks understood As ascesis, the practice of self-discipline through voluntary discomfort, the Stoics would intentionally sleep on hard floors, eat simple food, wear rough clothing, not because they were masochists, because they were training themselves to need less, to be resilient, to not be slaves to comfort, and you can do this too, not by making yourself miserable, but by intentionally choosing discomfort in small ways that build your tolerance for it. Take cold showers not forever, just at the end of your regular shower, 30 seconds, feel it, breathe through it. Prove to yourself that you can choose discomfort fast. Occasionally skip a meal, not for weight loss, just to remind yourself that hunger won't kill you, that you're not controlled by every urge. Sit in silence, no phone, no music, no podcast, just you and your thoughts. Let the boredom come, let the restlessness come. Don't escape it, just sit with it. These small practices aren't the goal, they're training, they're building your discomfort tolerance, so when the big challenges come, when you need to make the hard call, have the difficult conversation. Push through the wall, you have capacity you didn't have before. So here's your fourth exercise. Pick one form of voluntary discomfort this week, something small, something safe. Do it every day. Notice how your relationship to discomfort shifts. Notice how other things that used to feel hard start to feel more manageable. Because the person who can tolerate discomfort can do anything. Everything worthwhile requires discomfort, and you've just proven you can handle it. Let me tell you about a concept from the world of high-performance athletics. It's called the price of admission. Every goal has a price, not a monetary price, a price in discomfort and sacrifice and things you have to give up, and most people fail not because they can't pay the price, but because they refuse to acknowledge that the price exists. They want the result without the process. They want the weight loss without the diet. They want the business success without the risk. They want the relationship without the vulnerability. They want the skill without the practice, but the universe doesn't work that way. The price is non-negotiable. Let me give you a concrete example from my own life. When I decided to write my first book, I had this romantic idea of what it would be like. I'd sit in coffee shops, inspired words flowing effortlessly. The muse would visit and I'd capture lightning in a bottle. Reality was different. Reality was 5 a.m. wake-ups before work. Reality was writing when I was tired, when I had nothing to say, when every sentence felt like pulling teeth. Reality was 400 days of showing up whether I felt like it or not. The price of admission for that book was 400 days of doing something I didn't want to do, and I paid it not because I'm special, because I wanted the book more than I wanted comfort. So what's your price? What are you unwilling to pay that's keeping you stuck? The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard wrote about what he called the leap of faith, but he also wrote about something equally important, the recognition that every choice closes doors. When you choose one path, you're not choosing others, and that loss, that grief, is part of the price. Most people try to avoid the grief. They want the gain without the loss. They want to become disciplined without giving up their nights out. They want to build a business without sacrificing their free time. They want to get in shape without changing what they eat. But you can't have it both ways. Every yes is 1,000 no's, and the no's are the price. So let's get specific. If you want to be someone who wakes up early and works out, here's your price. You give up late nights. You give up hitting snooze. You give up the comfort of staying in bed when it's cold. That's the price. Pay it. Or don't, but don't pretend you can have the result without it. If you want to be someone who builds a successful business, here's your price. You give up the security of a paycheck. You give up weekends for a while. You give up the ability to blame anyone else when things go wrong. That's the price. Pay it. Or don't, but don't complain about the results of not paying. And here's what's interesting: when you actually acknowledge the price, when you look at it clearly and say, yes, I'm willing to pay, that something shifts. The struggle becomes choice. You stop being a victim of your circumstances and start being a volunteer for your growth. This is what Viktor Frankl wrote about in Man's Search for Meaning. He observed that in the concentration camps, the people who survived weren't necessarily the strongest or healthiest. They were the ones who found meaning in their suffering. They were the ones who could say, this horror is serving something. And I'm not comparing your goals to a concentration camp, I'm saying the principle applies when suffering. As meaning it becomes bearable when you choose the price, it stops being something that happens to you and starts being something you're doing for a reason. The person who wakes up at 5 a.m. and says, I have to, is suffering. The person who wakes up at 5 a.m. and says, I'm paying the price for something I want, is choosing same action, completely different experience. So here's your fifth exercise. Take out a piece of paper, write down your biggest goal at the top, then draw a line down the middle. On one side, write the result I want. On the other side, write the price. I must pay, be honest, be brutal. What do you actually have to give up? What discomfort do you have to choose? What habits do you have to kill? What relationships might not survive? Your growth, what comfort are you trading for capability? Now look at that price, really look at it, and ask yourself, is the result worth it? If the answer is yes, stop complaining about the price, stop wishing it were cheaper, stop looking for a discount that doesn't exist. Just pay it every day, willingly, joyfully, even because every payment brings you closer to the result you said you wanted. If the answer is no, if the price feels too high, that's okay too, but then stop pretending you want the result. Stop the half-hearted efforts, stop the self-flagellation about not being disciplined. Enough, you're not undisciplined, you just want something different than you thought. And that's useful information either way. Clarity is better than confusion. Choose your price or choose to want something else, but stop standing in the middle wanting the result without paying the price and wondering why you're stuck. Now let me introduce you to one of the most underrated tools in the discipline arsenal. Boredom. We've pathologized boredom in modern culture. The moment we feel bored, we reach for our phones. We scroll, we swipe, we consume. We've made boredom into an enemy to be defeated, rather than a signal to be understood. But here's what you're missing. Boredom is the gateway to depth. Think about the last time you were truly bored. No phone, no distraction. Just you and empty time. What happened? Your mind started to wander. You started thinking about things you'd been avoiding. You started having ideas. You started feeling feelings you'd been numbing. That's not a problem. That's the point. The psychologist Adam Alter has studied what he calls the boredom coefficient of activities. He found that activities with high boredom coefficients, things that require sustained attention without immediate reward, are precisely the activities that produce the deepest satisfaction. Reading a book, practicing an instrument, having a long conversation, working on a difficult problem. Activities with low boredom coefficients, scrolling social media, watching short videos, clicking through headlines, produce shallow, fleeting satisfaction. They kill boredom in the moment, but leave you emptier afterward. And here's the neuroscience. Your brain's default mode network activates when you're not focused on external stimuli. This network is responsible for self-reflection, future planning, creativity, and meaning-making. When you're constantly stimulating yourself, you never activate this network. You never process, you never integrate, you never create. You're basically outsourcing your brain's most important functions to apps designed to keep you distracted. The philosopher Blaise Pascal wrote in the 17th century, all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. He was right, and it's worse now than he could have imagined. So what does this have to do with discipline? Everything, because discipline isn't just about doing hard things, it's about being present with yourself. It's about not needing constant stimulation. It's about being able to work without reward, to wait without distraction, to sit with your own thoughts without escaping. The person who can't tolerate boredom can't sustain discipline, because discipline requires periods of no immediate gratification. It requires showing up when nothing exciting is happening. It requires doing the work even when the work is boring. Let me give you an example from the world of elite performers. Cal Newport, who writes about deep work, studied how creative professionals produce their best work. He found that the most productive people don't work in short bursts of inspiration. They work in long, uninterrupted blocks. They tolerate the boredom of sustained focus. They don't check their phones every few minutes. They don't reward themselves with distraction after 20 minutes of work. They've built what Newport calls boredom tolerance. They can stay with a problem for hours because they're not constantly escaping into stimulation, and you need to build this too. Here's how you start. Schedule boredom. Literally put it in your calendar. 30 minutes a day with no phone, no book, no music, no podcast, just you and your thoughts. Sit somewhere comfortable. Let your mind wander. Don't try to control it. Just be. The first few times it'll feel uncomfortable. You'll reach for your phone automatically. That's fine. Notice it. Put the phone down. Go back to sitting. Over time, something shifts. The discomfort fades. You start to actually enjoy these periods. You start to look forward to them. Your mind starts generating ideas, solving problems, processing emotions, all without you trying. This is what the Stoics called praesocia, attention to oneself. They believed that self-awareness was the foundation of all virtue, and self-awareness requires boredom. It requires stillness. It requires not running from yourself. So here's your sixth exercise today. Find 10 minutes of boredom. Leave your phone in another room. Sit somewhere quiet. Do nothing. Just notice what comes up. The urge to check, the restlessness, the thoughts you've been avoiding. Just notice. Then tomorrow do it again, and the next day build your boredom tolerance like a muscle. The person who can be bored without escaping can do anything. Because they're no longer controlled by the need for constant stimulation. They can focus when focus is required. They can wait when waiting is required. They can be present when presence is required. They're free. Now let me destroy another myth for you. The myth is that consistency means doing something perfectly every day, that if you miss one day, you've broken the streak, you failed. You might as well give up. This myth destroys more progress than laziness ever could. Here's the reality. Consistency isn't about perfection. It's about return. It's about what you do after you fall off. Think about navigation. When a ship sails from New York to London, it's off course 99% of the time. Winds push it, currents move it, waves rock it. But the captain constantly corrects, a little left, a little right, always adjusting, always returning to the heading. The ship doesn't give up when it gets pushed off course. It corrects. And because it corrects, it arrives. You need to think this way about your goals. You will get off course. You will miss workouts. You will eat the wrong thing. You will lose your temper. You will procrastinate. This isn't failure. This is navigation. The question isn't whether you'll get pushed off course. The question is how quickly you'll correct. The psychologist Angela Duckworth studied what she calls grit, passion, and perseverance for long-term goals, and she found something fascinating. Gritty people don't have more willpower than others. They don't have more self-control. What they have is a different relationship to failure. When gritty people fail, they don't interpret it as a sign that they should quit. They interpret it as a sign that they should try again. They have what psychologist Carol Dweck calls a growth mindset. They believe their abilities can be developed. So setbacks are just data, not verdicts. The person with a fixed mindset misses one workout and thinks, I'm so undisciplined, I might as well give up. The person with a growth mindset misses one workout and thinks, interesting, what caused that? How can I prevent it? Tomorrow, same event, completely different interpretation, completely different outcome. Let me give you a practical framework. It's called the Never Zero Rule. It comes from the world of habit formation, and it's simple. Never have a 0 day. A 0 day, 0 day is a day where you do absolutely nothing toward your goal. But here's the key, a 1 rep day counts. 5 minutes of work counts. A single push-up counts. The smallest possible action still breaks the 0. Why does this matter? Because the hardest part of consistency isn't the big efforts, it's the return after a break. When you have a 0 day, you break the psychological chain. You tell yourself, I'm the kind of person who doesn't do this, and that identity shift is devastating. But when you do something, anything, you maintain the identity. You keep the chain intact. You stay in the game. Let's say you're trying to build a writing habit. Your goal is 500 words a day. One day life happens. You're exhausted. You have no time. You're staring at the blank page at 11 p.m. What do? The perfectionist says, I can't do 500 words, so I'll do nothing. 0 day, identity broken. The practitioner says, I can't do 500 words, but I can write one sentence. One sentence, not 0. Identity maintained, and often that one sentence turns into a paragraph. which turns into a page, but even if it doesn't, even if it's just one sentence, you won. You kept the chain. This is how. You build unshakable consistency not through heroic efforts, through never letting the chain break, through always doing something even when you can't do everything. So here's your 7th exercise. Identify your minimum viable action for each goal. What's the smallest possible thing you can do that still counts? 1 push-up, 1 page, 1 minute of meditation, 1 sentence, $1 saved. Whatever it is, define it clearly. Now commit no 0 days every day you do at least that minimum, not because it'll transform you overnight, because it keeps you in the game, because it maintains the identity, because it makes tomorrow's return easy instead of hard. The person who never has 0 days doesn't need motivation. They don't need willpower. They just need to remember that something is always better than nothing. And that little bit of something done consistently compounds into everything now we need to correct. Another misunderstanding: most people think discipline is restrictive. They think it's about saying no, about deprivation, about living in a cage of your own. Making this is backwards, completely backwards. Discipline isn't restriction. Discipline is liberation. Structure isn't a cage. It's a container that holds your freedom. Think about language. Language has rules, grammar, syntax, vocabulary. These are restrictions. Technically, you can't just put words in any order and be understood, but because of those restrictions, you can communicate anything. The rules don't limit expression. They enable it. Think about music. Music has structure, scales, chords, rhythm. These are constraints, but within those constraints, infinite expression is possible. The structure doesn't limit creativity, it channels it. Discipline is the same. It's not about what you can't do. It's about creating the conditions for what you really want to do. Let me give you an example. A friend of mine is a successful novelist. She writes from 8 a.m. to noon every day, no exceptions, no negotiation. That's her structure. Someone might look at that and say how restrictive, how boring, how disciplined she must be. But here's what they don't see: because she has that structure, she never has to wonder when she writes. She never has to find time. She never has to negotiate with herself. The decision is already made, and because the decision is made, her mind is free, free to create, free to imagine, free to write. Without the burden of constant choice, the structure doesn't restrict her. It frees her from the exhaustion of deciding. This is what the philosopher and psychologist William James wrote about over a century ago. He said, "There is no more miserable human being than one in whom nothing is habitual, but indecision. Every decision you have to make costs you something. It costs energy, it costs attention, it costs willpower, and when you have too many decisions to make, you become depleted, you become anxious, you become stuck." Discipline removes decisions. It makes things automatic. It creates habits so you don't have to choose every time, and in doing so, it frees your mental energy for what actually matters. The person with no structure spends all day deciding and has no energy left for doing. The person with structure has already decided and can put all their energy into execution. So here's your 8th exercise. Look at your typical day. Where are you making unnecessary decisions? What you'll eat, what you'll wear, when you'll work, which task to do. First, simplify, standardize, create routines. Make as many decisions as possible automatic, not because you're trying to be robotic, because you're trying to preserve your decision energy for what actually matters. The most important decisions of your life deserve your best mental energy. Don't waste it on what to have for breakfast. The person who masters structure doesn't feel trapped. They feel free because they've stopped fighting themselves and started channeling themselves. Now we need to talk about something that might be the hardest part of all the people you'll lose on this journey, because when you start to change, when you start to grow, when you start to become someone who doesn't negotiate with their own weakness, you will become uncomfortable to be around. For certain people, and this isn't your imagination, it's not paranoia, it's a predictable social dynamic that plays out every single time someone decides to level up. Let me explain what happens when you start to change. Your circle is calibrated to a certain version of you. They know how you operate, they know your weaknesses, they know your patterns, and whether consciously or unconsciously, They've built a relationship with that version of you. When you start to change, you break the contract, you become unpredictable. You become a variable they can't control, and this is threatening to them not because they're bad people, but because your growth highlights their stagnation. You become a mirror reflecting everything they're not doing, and mirrors are uncomfortable. When you're avoiding yourself, think about it. If you're in a group of friends who all drink heavily and you decide to stop drinking, you're not just making a personal choice, you're implicitly challenging their choice every time you're around them. Sober, you're demonstrating that it's possible to have fun without alcohol. And that demonstration is an accusation they didn't ask for. They'll feel it even if you never say.